Hey there, and welcome back to Recap Mania. Today, I'm going to explain the movie Earth vs. the Spider, which is a sci-fi horror film about a shy comic book fan, Quentin Cameron, who gains spider-like abilities after injecting himself with an experimental serum derived from a genetically altered arachnid, leading to terrifying consequences. Quentin Cameron reads about a dangerous criminal on the loose with 7 victims. He dreams that one day he could fight evil, but for now he works as a security guard. Quentin meets his new neighbor, Stephanie, a nursing student who had moved closer to work. Then they encounter local hooligans who harass Stephanie, and Quentin tries to calm them down. The punks threaten Quentin, but Stephanie steps in to protect him, leaving Quentin embarrassed and ashamed. Quentin arrives at work in a biochemistry lab. He and his older partner, Papa Nick, patrol the building. Nick asks Quentin if he has asked Stephanie out, but Quentin hesitates, thinking he's a loser. Nick assures Quentin he's a decent guy and expresses pride in him. They peek into a lab where scientists experiment on spiders and witness a spider receiving a red injection before the blinds are closed. During their shift, they notice 2 men attacking a scientist and dragging her into a lab. Nick tries to sound the alarm, but it doesn't work. Armed with pepper spray, he rushes to help. Quentin returns to the security office and sees the situation on CCTV. He rushes to help but is intercepted by 2 older cops, who are also on duty in the building. They storm into the room and a gunfight breaks out. Quentin and Officer Williams enter the wrecked room after the gunfire fades, finding everyone dead, including Nick. Devastated, Quentin struggles to come to terms with his partner's death. He argues with Officer Williams, who blames him for the incident. Their confrontation is interrupted by Detective Jack Griot, who arrives at the crime scene. He dismisses the aggressive cop and tells him to calm down. A lab worker reports to Detective Griot that there were no valuables in the building, and the purpose of the attack remained unclear. The situation worsens as Quentin is fired for failing to perform his duties, and reporters cast him as the main culprit in the incident. He begins to hear voices and goes to the room where the spider was experimented on. He injects himself with the red substance and loses consciousness. The next day, Stephanie notices Quentin's alarm clock still ringing and becomes worried. She finds his apartment a mess. The next day, Stephanie reads a newspaper article about Quentin and decides to check on him. She finds the apartment in disarray and Quentin in a poor state. Stephanie provides medical attention to him when she notices a puncture mark on his arm. Quentin assures her that the wound was because of an accident in the lab. That evening, Quentin dresses in black and goes to a bar where cops hang out. He watches Officer Williams, who is with a blonde woman. The bartender notices a spiderweb tattoo on Quentin's arm and tells him the woman is Detective Jack Griot's wife. Griot is not respected by his fellow cops, who think he's weak. Quentin can relate to that feeling. Griot enters the bar, confronts Williams, and takes his wife home. Williams moves on to another woman and Quentin leaves without retaliating. Later, Stephanie returns home and notices someone following her. A man attacks her just as she enters her apartment. Quentin, distracted by a homeless Willie, senses something wrong and rushes to help Stephanie. He finds her keys on the floor and enters her apartment. The man is assaulting Stephanie, but Quentin stops him, using his new abilities to throw the criminal away and break the door of the next apartment. Quentin's life takes a dramatic turn as he understands the consequences of his actions and the challenges of his newfound powers. Stephanie survived the attack, but her mysterious savior vanishes. Detective Griot and the police arrive and find the man with a broken neck. Griot interrogates Stephanie, who couldn't recall her hero's face. Quentin appears at Stephanie's door, offering comfort as she tearfully recounts her rescue. She described her savior as a true hero. Quentin couldn't contain his excitement. His dream had come true, and he now possessed incredible powers akin to his favorite superhero. After a while at home, Quentin begins to experience hallucinations and becomes repulsed by food. Awakening in the middle of the night, he found himself literally hanging and shooting spiderwebs from his chest. Eager to test his abilities, he covered various objects in his apartment with webs, even unintentionally trapping his dog Thor. Quentin's inner turmoil escalates, leading him to attack and abduct a policeman. Meanwhile, Stephanie discovers Thor outside her door with a note from Quentin, asking her to temporarily care for his pet. In the middle of the night, Quentin awakens with a sharp pain in his gums. To his horror, he discovers a spider sting emerging from his mouth. Overwhelmed by the unexpected transformation, Quentin screams in terror. Startled by Quentin's scream, Stephanie rushes in, insisting that he open the door for her. A poignant conversation unfolds between them. Quentin musters the courage to ask Stephanie out on a date, but she confesses that she has been waiting for him to ask her for a long time. Stephanie proposes that they have a romantic evening right away, but Quentin painfully rejects her, believing it is too late. He pushes her away, unable to reveal his monstrous transformation, while secretly clinging to hope that he can control his superpowers and suppress his transformation into a spider. However, as evening falls, Quentin's hunger intensifies, driving him to ravage his entire apartment in search of sustenance. Stephanie hears his screams and thrashing through the walls, but feels helpless, unable to assist him. Overwhelmed by hunger, he happens upon a man trying to rape a woman and attacks him. To his surprise, the woman yells at him for the man was her boyfriend. When she tries to call the police, he traps her in webs. Officer Williams arrives at the scene and attempts to free the woman, but gets attacked by Quentin. Later, Detective Griot is horrified by the scene left behind by Quentin. Quentin discovers a way to satiate his hunger by luring local hooligans into the basement of the building and making them his gruesome dinner. Detective Griot, determined to get to the bottom of the murders, begins to suspect Quentin. As Griot arrives at Quentin's residence, he discovers a massive web on the railing near the basement, arousing suspicion and prompting him to collect samples for analysis. Quentin breaks into a store, seeking solace and attempting to resist his instincts. He engages in a conversation seeking guidance on the arachnid. Han reveals the weakness of Quentin's beloved superhero, a human heart. Armed with this knowledge, Quentin fights against his consuming desires. In the depths of his despair, Detective Griot seeks solace in a bar, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. Eventually, he gathers the strength to continue his investigation and returns to Quentin's home. By now, Quentin is on the verge of complete transformation, leaving Griot without any answers. Reluctantly, Griot departs, leaving Quentin behind. As Griot persists in his search, he suspects that the web samples hold the key to unraveling the mystery. However, his colleagues refuse to analyze them, leading Griot to face obstacles in his pursuit of the truth. One of the police officers issues a warning to Detective Griot, urging him to step away from the case. Throughout his investigation, Griot's wife shadows him, hoping to uncover clues that would lead her to Officer Williams. Despite the pressure, the detective decides to trust his instincts and ventures into Quentin's basement. Inside the basement, a horrifying sight awaits Griot. The room is filled with spiderweb cocoons, each containing a human victim. To his surprise, one of the victims is still alive, trapped in a moving cocoon. It becomes clear that the culprit spared was Officer Williams. Griot rushes to free the officer from his confinement, but his wife abruptly enters the basement, distracting the detective. In a tragic turn of events, Officer Williams chooses to end his own life, shooting himself in the head. Mrs. Griot is then forcefully taken away by Quentin, while the detective tries to intervene. Griot manages to drive the assailant away, but it's too late to save his wife, who passes away. Meanwhile, Stephanie returns home and discovers a broken window on the second floor. As she investigates further, she notices Quentin's silhouette across the hallway. Quentin has completely lost control and transformed into a hideous mutant with 6 paws protruding from his back. He viciously attacks Stephanie and drags her along. Hearing the commotion from upstairs, Griot rushes to the rescue, but Quentin has already escaped with his captive. Following the trail of spiderwebs, the determined detective arrives at an abandoned building. Inside, he finds Stephanie trapped and terrified, pinned to a massive spiderweb. Quentin, now fully in the form of a spider, retains a fragment of his sanity. Desperate to stop himself and save the girl, he pleads with Detective Griot to shoot him in the heart. Griot hesitates, torn between his duty and the belief that Quentin can still be saved. Stephanie also implores Quentin to regain control, convinced that it's not too late for redemption. However, Quentin knows that his transformation is irreversible and he can no longer be helped. In a final act, Quentin lunges toward Stephanie, prompting Griot to fire several shots. One of the bullets strikes the monster directly in the heart, freezing him just inches away from Stephanie. Grateful, she recognizes the spark of goodness within Quentin as he saved her from his disfigured and uncontrollable form. So, with that, this movie recap episode has come to an end here. Let us know if you are intrigued to watch the movie after seeing our recap in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more recaps. Till then, goodbye.